Good morning. My name is Aisha Chugtai, and I'm the chair of the Budget Committee. I'm going to call to order our regular meeting for Tuesday, October. Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include captioning, the further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. For all speakers to be mindful of the rate of their speech, so that our captioners can capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify the presence of the quorum.
Councilmember
Present.
Wansley.
Present.
Bill is absent. Vita.
Present.
Osman is absent. Kevin.
Present.
Jenkins is absent. Chavez. Cherry.
Present.
Palmisano is absent. Cherkowski.
Present.
There are 8 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. I'll also remind colleagues that we're going to be using speaker management today. So please make sure you sign in. Colleagues, the agenda for today's meeting before us. Are there any amendments to the agenda? I'll recognize Councilmember Wansley.
You, Council President Chugtai, I would like to motion to amend the agenda to include the motion that's before the body that is authored by myself as well as you and Councilmember Chavez. This is a motion asking for allocation within the existing health department's budget to establish a pollution control annual registration program for carbon dioxide equivalents. I don't believe I need a second since it's authored, but yeah.
Madam Chair, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I just heard from our AV team we're having some broadcast issues. So if we could just short recess while we resolve the issues, and I'll keep you updated.
We'll take a brief recess.
Testing 1 2. Test 1 2. Testing 1 2. Test 1 2.
All right, we're going to reconvene our regular meeting of the Budget Committee. Just to make sure that this was captured for the broadcast, Councilmember Wansley, will you repeat your motion?
Thank you, Council Vice President. Yes, I would like to motion to amend the agenda to include the item that is before the body right now, that is authored by you as Council Vice President, as well as Councilmember Chavez. And this item is motioning for allocation within the existing Health Department's budget to establish a pollution control annual registration program for carbon dioxide equivalents.
Councilmember Wansley has moved to add to this meeting's agenda a resolution to the general appropriation resolution. As there are 3 authors on this item, we do not need a second. Is there any discussion on the motion to add this item to the agenda? I'm not seeing any. Mr. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 10 ayes.
That motion carries, and this resolution has been added as item number 3 to this meeting's discussion agenda. With that, we will begin with discussion item number 1, which is for the appointed position of Deputy Director of Civil Rights. I will invite Brenda Miller, Compensation and Classifications Manager from the Human Resources Department, to begin that presentation. Welcome, Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Chair Chugtai and members of the committee, I'm here to bring forward one appointed position, that is the Deputy Director Civil Rights. The Deputy Director Civil Rights is part of the Civil Rights Department and assists the Director Civil Rights with managing the day-to-day operations of the Civil Rights Department. The Deputy Director Civil Rights has been evaluated at 685 points, grade 15. The 2024 schedule for this position is between $150,000 to $178,000. The 24 and 25 costs are being paid through cost savings from replacing the Director Civil Rights Equity position with this position and from reallocating some money from the non-personnel budget in 2024 and 2025. Changes are effective October 17th of 2024. This position meets the criteria. This position meets the criteria of Section 201010 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances. It reports to the Director of Civil Rights. It's a member of the Civil Rights Department Executive Management Team. It develops and implements city policy, goals, and strategic planning for the Civil Rights Department. It requires leadership, vision, team building, and strategy implementation, and establishes policy goals and strategies that are consistent with the goals and priorities established by the mayor, city council, and the Director of Civil Rights. Please find that the Deputy Director Civil Rights meets the appointed criteria as defined in Section 201010 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances and forward it on to council for final approval. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Ms. Miller. Is there any discussion or are there any questions from members of the committee? I am I'm not seeing any. So with that, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstention? The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Miller. With that, we will move to item number 2, which is a presentation from the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, and we have several speakers joining us today. I will invite Minneapolis Public Housing Authority Executive Director and CEO Abdi Warsami to join us and begin that presentation. Welcome, Director.
Thank you, Chair Chuktai and members of the Budget Committee. My name is Abdi Warsami. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. And today we are here to give an update to the Budget Committee around our levy, capital deployment, and proposed new funding. So thank you for having us. And with me are our Planning and Development Director, Laura Dykema, who's going to do most of the presentation, as well as Drew Hallinan, who's our Assistant Director of Communications and Strategic Initiatives, as well as our CFO, Tim DeRose. So thank you for having us, and we'll start with just giving you an overview of our presentation today. We're going to talk about our MPHA's capital backlog. We're going to cover 2023 agency accomplishments. We're going to go over the housing levy and capital plan and deployment, and then our proposed $1.3 million city investment for our 809 and 828 Springs Street Northeast development. As you know, MPHA is the largest housing authority in the state of Minnesota, the largest housing authority in the city. We take care of roughly around 5% of the city's population through our various programs, and that's around 26,000 individuals. And let me talk a little bit about the capital backlog, because it's going to underpin a lot of our presentation today. MPHA's housing stock comprises around 6,000 units, located around 42 high-rises, plus 736 scattered site homes, 184 units in Glendale, and a 16-unit townhome development. Most of our high-rises and public housing was developed around the 1960s and early 1970s. The age of our single-family or family housing ranges from 1 year to 100 years. We just had the new 84 new development, but majority of our housing stock are aging properties. For example, our Glendale development celebrated its 70th anniversary in 2023. So what this means is basically MPHA has old housing stock, and there's also been disinvestment in federal funding for public housing across the country, which has resulted in a capital backlog around $260 million. So we estimate this is $260 million. It keeps growing, and last year it grew for around $25 million. And this capital backlog is just to keep what we have. So not adding any new units or updating units or adding any bells and whistles. This is just to keep and serve the people that we're serving currently. Historically, HUD has provided around 10% of the capital needs, so 10 cents for every dollar that we need. And recent historic inflation rates and volatility in the construction market has also impacted us as well. If we can go a little bit around our 2023 agency accomplishments. And we know the capital backlog is huge, but we're trying to tackle it through myriad projects. We got $5 million capital grant from the legislator to repair our deeply affordable family housing. And this was the first direct appropriation to any housing authority in our state. We also scored 98.5% on the HUD physical inspections. This is a yearly inspections that HUD does on all housing authorities. And we got 98.5% on a 100 scale, which is the largest in the history of our agency. We also got $4 million extra in new funding from the City of Minneapolis and Hennepin County to expand our Stable Homes, Stable Schools. It's a program now that's in every single elementary school in the Minneapolis School District. We're very proud of that, and thank you to the City Council and the City leadership for that. And we also gained $1.3 million from the Minnesota Housing Short program to repair, again, our family housing. And also, and thank you to the city council, and the mayor's office for the reinstatement of the levy, which is now $5 million a year to go to our preservation and production work. The levy was inactive for 14 years. And even before then, we only used to receive around $1 million that used to go towards security guards. So now this is going towards our preservation and our production work, and it's 5 times what we used to get in the past. So thank you very much for that. We also helped 450 MPHA families receive $800,000 in rent relief through Hennepin County's emergency assistance funds. So not only are we housing families, but we're also trying to make sure that our families stay in place. And so that's some of the accomplishments. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Laura Dykema to talk a little bit about our levy budget. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you, Executive Warsami. Good morning. My name is Laura Dykema. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the Housing Authority. So right here, this slide provides an overview of our 2024 approved levy budget, which MPHA developed with consideration of our 5-year strategic plan, as well as our resident feedback. The plan incorporates health, safety, code compliance, and quality of life improvements. $2.5 million has been earmarked for MPHA's next high-rise preservation and new unit production project, which is located at 2 Northeast Minneapolis high-rises, which we'll talk more about as we move through our presentation. The scope of work contemplated includes addressing short and long-term capital needs, enhanced resident amenities and community spaces, energy efficiency upgrades, and a 4-story building addition adjacent to the 828 high-rise building. This addition will house 15 new units, all of which will be handicap accessible. A total of $1.25 million is dedicated to 2 scattered sites infill projects, both located in South Minneapolis. These projects will replace 2 single-family homes with a total of 5 new family units, and at least 2 of those units will be fully accessible. And then lastly, $1.25 million will cover comprehensive elevator modernization at 2 elderly designated high-rises in North Minneapolis. These properties are homes to over 450 residents who rely on those elevators for safe transportation to the upper floors of those buildings. This next slide here talks about the deployment of those resources. So as the Budget Committee is likely aware, tax levy proceeds are delivered in 2 yearly installments. The first installment just recently received by MPHA in July. While a portion of those funds were only recently received, the agency has done significant planning work to ensure we can put these funds to work quickly. And details of the pre-work are noted on this slide. That said, our 3 development projects have longer planning runways, and therefore funds earmarked for those projects will not be utilized until financial closings and construction commencement. All 3 projects are, though, on track to close in quarter 2 or 3 of 2025, at which time those funds will be fully committed. Our 2 elevator modernization projects are, however, well underway. We executed construction contracts for those buildings this winter, and construction is nearly complete at 1 property. We have deployed nearly $445,000 of those resources at that building, and the second building is now under construction, and both of those projects will be completed this year. The agency is also hard at work deploying other resources that Executive Director Warsami mentioned that we were able to secure over the past couple of years. This includes approximately $10 million in total resources for repairs in our CHR, or family housing stock. These homes are scattered across the city and make up the majority of MPHA's family housing stock. Construction is well underway at multiple homes funded by the city's $3.7 million. This includes extensive rehab of 4 long-term vacant homes, one of which will be made fully accessible, as well as roof, window, and siding replacements at 19 other homes. This work is expected to wrap up by late 2024. MPHA recently issued invitation for bids on the $5 million in renovations made possible by the state of Minnesota. This includes the same types of exterior improvements, so roofing, windows, and siding at over 50 homes. We expect most of this work will be completed in 2025. And we've essentially deployed all of the $3 million in short funds, also made available by the state of Minnesota, for interior rehab in CHR homes. This is primarily kitchen and bathroom renovations and system updates completed at vacant unit turn. And lastly, I'm happy to report that all of MPHA's 42 high-rises are now fully retrofitted with fire suppression systems. And this work was completed in August. We just had a celebration recently to celebrate that work. And it was made possible by the resources made available from city, state, and federal government entities. So this slide here summarizes our 2025 levy budget and 5-year plan. Details for each of these projects are on the following 5 slides. I'm not going to go through all of those slides, but I will provide a summary of our proposed plan. Highlights include additional resources to support the Springs Preservation and Expansion Project I mentioned earlier. This is Dev 01 in 2025. We did allocate some resources in 2024, and we're dedicating some additional dollars here, $3.5 million. To this project, and we're also doing conversions and preservation work at 2 other high-rises in 2026 and 27. This is Dev 03 on this slide. A total of $2 million will be dedicated to those projects. This work would include addressing all property capital needs, as well as enhanced amenities and community spaces for our residents. We would also closely evaluate these buildings to see if there's any opportunity to add units, as well as address accessibility or other needs of those communities. Dev 02 in 2026 is funds to support a scattered site family upzoning project at 5 sites across the city with the goal of constructing 30 new units. So this would be very similar to our family housing expansion project, just on a smaller scale. And we actually intend to engage with residents who've moved into our family housing expansion new units to talk about what's working at those properties to help shape this next project. We also have a number of major capital investments included at multiple high-rises. Cap 01 includes funding in 2025 and 27 for a total of $3 million to replace older windows with more energy-efficient assemblies at 3 high-rises. Cap 02 funds 4 additional elevator modernization projects in 2026, 28, and 29 for a total of $1.5 million. And Cap 03 provides resources to replace 3 high-rise boiler plants with more energy-efficient systems, which would be a total of $2.5 million. And lastly, we're dedicating significant resources towards our Glendale townhomes redevelopment. This is Dev 04 on the slide, particularly in the out years. This really illustrates MPHA's commitment to this property and that it is a priority for us. And while we don't know yet what the vision is or their plans are for that community, we do know that this will be a resource-intensive project, and whatever we do will be guided by extensive resident engagement. Our funding request starts in 2026 to support engagement and pre-development work and ramps up as we move into 2028, which is when we would hope to start on the first phase of a multi-phase project. So a total of $10.5 million over 2026 to 29 we're dedicating towards Glendale. Again, the next 5 slides provide some more details on these plans, which are subject to change since we go through an annual process. But we would like to talk a little bit more about our next RAD project, the Springs. So I'll turn it back over to Executive Director Warsami to kick us off.
Thank you, Laura. Chair Choktai and council members, our next rental assistance demonstration project will be at 809 and 828 Spring Manor, which is, I believe, in Ward 3, Councilmember Rainville's ward, not far from Council President Payne's ward. And in 2022, MPHA celebrated the completion of our first RAD project, and that was in our Elliott Twins in Elliott Park neighborhood in Ward 6. That was a $27 million project. We remodeled and rehabbed and preserved 170 4 units. We also added 10 disability accessible units. There was no involuntary displacement at the Elliots. So not a single resident lost their home because of this RAD project. So we're very proud of that. We also transformed and added 6,200 square feet of community and office amenities. And so this is our next project. This is the next RAD, or Rent to Assistant Demonstration project. And MPHA is advancing the 809 and 828 Springs. We aim to rehabilitate and preserve 221 existing units. And we also want to add 15 new accessible, deeply affordable units. These properties mainly house senior citizens, and we are looking for ways to make sure that our residents there can age in place. So these 15 units will be for that. The full project details will be available to everyone, and we will have a celebration on October 22nd, and we will make sure that you're all up to date with that announcement. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Drew Hallinan to talk a little bit about a complicated process called the Faircloth to RAD. Go ahead.
Thank you, Abdi. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Drew Hallinan. First of all, I apologize to the closed captioning people. I do have a tendency to speak quickly, so I apologize in advance to those folks. But I'm here today to talk a little bit about a pilot program. This is directly related to the $1.3 million investment from the city that supplements the $5 million ongoing levy. In this 809-828 Springs project, MPHA is proposing to pilot a new HUD funding tool called Faircloth to RAD. Talking a little bit about what Faircloth is. The Faircloth Authority is the number of public housing units, which are as designated by Section 9 by HUD, that a public housing authority is entitled to receive operating and capital funding for. That number, that Faircloth Authority, is tethered to the number of units owned and operated as of October 1st, 1999. For political reasons, that's the number. It is an arbitrary date, but it was just set for political reasons. For MPHA, our Faircloth Authority limit is 6,393. So we talk about RAD, we've talked about Section 18, we've talked about using a couple programs that usually move units from Section 9 public housing over to the Section 8 housing choice voucher program. We have found in our family housing portfolio that's increased federal subsidy by about 2.5 times for owning and operating the same home, serving the same residents, using the same staff. So we're just using a variety of federal tools. When we use tools like that, we bring down our number of Section 9 units, but we remain entitled to receive that operating and capital funding by HUD for those units. So Faircloth to RAD, so we have about 899 of those units for which we are entitled to that capital and operating funding, but we are not currently receiving because we've shifted them to Section 8 or elsewhere. And I also want to clarify that this shifting out of the Section 9 public housing to the Section 8 platform is not unique to Minneapolis. This is something that is happening all across the country because it's just advantageous for funding purposes to do that. And so HUD recognizes that, and recently they developed a tool to try to provide housing authorities an opportunity to re-access or re-energize that funding that they're entitled to but not yet receiving. And they call that Faircloth to RAD. So I will say it is an incredibly complex program. We have our CFO, our P&D director, among others, here to help supplement some questions. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're trying to keep it pretty high level. And we mentioned the event on October 22nd. Concurrent with that event, we'll provide a rather lengthy, detailed written explanation that can provide a little more nuance that explains kind of the intricacies of Faircloth to RAD. But at its core, at its most basic, it again enables housing authorities to unlock that unused Faircloth authority to help build new, deeply affordable housing. So it helps us unlock that unused Section 9 subsidy to create new, deeply affordable housing. But as with Section 9, that new subsidy that gets unlocked is still inadequate. It is still lower. You know, we talk about the $260 million capital backlog getting 10 cents on the dollar from HUD. It's still that funding subsidy level when you unlock it using this program. So it requires us to supplement that funding with additional funding, which is where the $1.3 million investment request from the city comes from, is to help us deploy this pilot and supplement it with the necessary funding. And Laura is going to talk about about in a moment kind of how the math worked out on 1.3 million and where that's going to go. But I will just note that to date, HUD estimates fewer than 15 of these FDR projects have been completed around the country. MPHA, whether it be Stable Home, Stable Schools, the Family Housing Expansion Project, the Elliott Twins, we've really been doing not to toot our own horns, we've been doing a pretty good job at some unique programming and some unique opportunities and taking advantage of some nation-leading work. So we want to lean right into that here, and that in our next major redevelopment project, we do want to pilot this FTR subsidy structure. So I'll turn it over to Laura to talk a little bit more about how we get to that $1.3 million request.
Thank you, Drew. And I also would like to note that HUD does not provide any sort of resources to housing authorities for any new unit development. So although this program allows us to get operating subsidy for those units, there are no funds coming into this project from the federal government to build those new units. So MPHA is proposing to try this program again at the Springs redevelopment because it is largely untested, and it does provide us a very good opportunity to learn more with less risk, and I'll explain why. So the Springs redevelopment includes the rehab of 221 existing units, and the HUD conversion tool that we'll use for those existing units will provide a much higher subsidy, thereby mitigating some of the impact of the lower subsidy we receive for the 15 new Faircloth to RAD units. And I'll just mention that it is a 35 to 50% lower subsidy that we receive for those Faircloth to RAD units versus the existing 221 units, and the subsidies will receive by converting those properties. This project will also be financed with bonds, low-income housing tax credits, and debt. While the higher subsidies we'll receive for the 221 existing units helps offset the lower Faircloth to RAD subsidies, we do still lose some debt capacity because of those lower subsidies, which we're equating to about the $1.3 million. We did present this challenge to Mayor Fry during our annual summer budget meeting and requested that the city provide a one-time investment to cover this lost debt capacity, which Mayor Fry subsequently proposed as part of his overall budget. By testing this program with the Springs redevelopment, we'll be able to better inform how this tool may be utilized in the future and answer many of the questions that we have in our minds and many others have posed to us, just only knowing about this program on a very limited basis. So I'll turn it back over to Drew to speak about that further.
Thank you, Laura. So as we mentioned, this is a pilot, and as Laura outlined, it is as a part of a much larger project. So the risk that we run is very much mitigated because of the larger subsidy that we get for the vast majority of the rest of the project. So we saw this as a tremendous opportunity to explore this. So on this slide, this kind of closes out our presentation. This kind of outlines what we're hoping to understand, accomplish, and achieve through this pilot. And first and foremost, does this work? Because like I said, there are fewer than 15 of these completed projects around the country, according to HUD, and so it is largely untested. So we're going to test it. So first and foremost, does this work? Can we, as an agency, work through the variety of compliance and development requirements to build the 15 new units using this FTR subsidy structure? And if it's successful, I think, and this is a pitch that we made and what we talked about earlier this summer, if this is successful, it does have the opportunity to unlock millions of new dollars, new federal subsidy for the city of Minneapolis to build deeply affordable housing, because we have 899 units of unused Faircloth authority. So if we can figure this out and get this to work, it does have the potential to lock millions more in new federal subsidies, which I think is kind of why we're willing to pilot it in this project, because we see what the opportunity is. But beyond the primary goal, we also want to explore a couple other questions. So, the FDR subsidy rates that we get, does that mean that only MPHA can self-develop, or could we award them similar to a project-based voucher to some of our nonprofit development partners? Is that something that we could do? We don't know at this time. Would this, and would that process maybe pose some other unique challenges that a nonprofit developer wouldn't want to take on? So again, we only can self-develop. how can we work with HUD to kind of revise or improve the overall requirements and subsidies of the FTR pilot to help not only MPHA but other PHAs around the country lean into this program and use this program and deploy new federal resources in a way that kind of works for them and meets them where they're at. And then the last two here, if feasible, what would the cost associated be with deploying this at a greater scale? Like I said, we have 899 units of unused fair cloth authority. So if we can kind of figure this out, if we can answer some questions here, what would the cost be associated to make a real large-scale effort to deploy more of these resources? And then finally, fair cloth authority is not unique to Minneapolis. In fact, almost every PHA and housing redevelopment authority in the state of Minnesota has unused fair cloth authority. And so is there a role for city, local, state government to supplement some of the funding for these different PHA, HRA, fair cloth authority units throughout the state? So we'll be a leader, around the country, but we'll definitely be a leader in the state. And from what we learned here, we might be able to unlock new additional state subsidy resources, not only for Minneapolis, but jurisdictions around the state as well. So I'll turn it back over to Abdi here for any remaining questions.
Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Colleagues, are there any questions for the team here from the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority? I see first, Council President Payne.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai. All of the topic of public housing is so complex because of so many entanglements with the federal government. And I was just curious, I'm going to try to structure this in an understandable way. Obviously, there's a lot of barriers to building new housing. I think chief among them is the Fair Cloth Act and the cap that puts on us. And then obviously, it's just budget. But I was just curious if you could give more clarity around, even if we could wave a magic wand and get rid of the Fair Cloth Act, wouldn't we still be in a structural deficit in terms of the current funding level per unit for operations, or am I not understanding that correctly?
Yes. Answer is yes.
Okay. And so as I think about our role, obviously part of our role is having you come to the city year after year asking for additional funding to help close that structural deficit. But I also see one of our roles is trying to advocate so that we don't have that structural deficit in this process. And I'm just curious if you have any guidance for us as we carry that message and use our platform at the local level to fight for that funding.
Yeah. Chair Chugtai, Council President Payne, the last couple of years, the work that this council has done and the mayor's office, especially our IGR committee and staff, in terms of advocating for the needs of MPHA at the state, has had, great progress. We've made great progress, and I think continuing that. And for us, the challenge has been to demonstrate these tools. RAD was very controversial. To demonstrate that we can use it, make sure that we can keep our residents whole, no displacement, do it within budget, on time. I think continuing to do these, taking these incremental steps will have a huge impact. But there is a role for the local government jurisdictions, the state, the county, and the city of Minneapolis in order to address not only the capital backlog, but just the waiting list now. It keeps increasing. We just had, and we will have more on this, which is opened one of our waiting lists, and this huge demand and huge need. So yes to that answer. And also, this demonstration that we're doing with Faircloth, once we get real tangible results, we want to go back to HUD as well to say to them, this is what we found. The level of funding is not enough. Let's get more, So there's advocacy in every single jurisdiction, but I think it's important for us to continue the work that we've been doing and the leadership that this council has demonstrated, the support that it has given MPHA in terms of reinstating the levy is going to have a huge impact, but it's going to take incremental steps.
Yeah, just know that we want to remain in close partnership with you as we fight for those resources, and I definitely want you to work closely with our IGR chair, Councilmember Chowdhury, because I know that this is a passion of hers as well.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Council Vice President. More so not a question, but a comment. Just wanted to say thank you all for presenting this information today. As someone who's worked very closely with you all on securing that $5 million levy, as well as a $5 million allocation from the state, and the 1.2 for the sprinklers, like it's been challenging to hear, what are we doing with these resources that has been fought tooth and nail for our public housing authority. And it's good to see the 5-year plan that you all just laid out in front of us on how you are using it to preserve our current, public housing stock. But what I'm most excited to see is how we're leveraging that in addition to other tools around reaching that fair cloth, or that minimum that we're able to reach. And I know that's been an ongoing conversation that I'm looking forward to have with Congresswoman Omar around what do we need to do again in if it's legislatively, what is it when it comes to getting HUD on board with removing that cap, but also providing you all more funding, especially through Section 8, and not just having to rely on RAD as a means for reaching that fair cloth minimum. So I just wanted to say thank you for presenting a robust plan on how you've been, rolling out these resources that you've gotten in a very short period of time, and really excited to see this.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then next, I will recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. And thank you for coming today. You're doing great work. I was recently out to the Springs, as you call them. That's a very clever name. And the residents there are so excited about getting the remodeling going and the fact that their needs are being met. So thank you so much for that hard work. In the chart you had showing your capital needs, it's skyrocketing. That graph is straight up. And is that because the buildings are so old, lack of investment in the past, a combination? But that's really a big increase.
Chair Chuktai, Councilmember Rainville, I'm going to let Laura Dykem kind of answer that question.
Thank you. Yes, it is a combination of those factors. Buildings continue to age, and we're only getting 10 cents on the dollar that we need to address these needs. But I'll say there's other things like code compliance issues that have changed. Our buildings were built at a time where, building codes were very different at that time. And so we have to address new needs that come from those changes in code. And we also want to address other types of needs, like the sprinklers, for example. Those were a life safety system that wasn't required when those buildings were built, but it was a very important need to address nonetheless. But yeah, it's just we have failing plumbing, electrical systems are becoming obsolete. Even some of the fire panels that we installed and replaced 20 years ago are already becoming obsolete, and so we're having to go through and replace those again. So it's a constant challenge to address things when things continue to evolve. And I will say also that, yes, with the recent volatile construction market, it costs even more to address these capital needs than it ever has. So, yes, it just remains an ongoing challenge for us.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, I'll recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This year, the 13th Ward welcomed one of the 16 scattered site family housing expansions, and I'm thrilled for this to be in the 13th Ward. We are an area largely devoid of significant amounts of affordable housing. On slide 5, I think it was the second row, you mentioned 3-unit scattered sites infill demonstration project in an opportunity area. And it said Southwest, and I'm just curious if you can tell us more about this project or more about what you consider opportunity areas.
Yeah, so the sites where these are located is 56th and Blaisdell and 46th and Portland, so Southwest primarily. And so it's, again, areas that are more largely devoid of affordable housing. So we're really excited about densifying those sites. One site will be a duplex. We actually lost a single-family home to a fire. This is also a little bit of a demonstration. We're trying to develop a design that we could deploy at some of our other single-family sites. And then at the 56th and Blaisdell site, this will be a triplex, and we've just now picked up the design work again. We had to pause a little bit for complications around 2040, but our latest renderings look great. We are able to, I think, get 2 accessible units at the Blaisdell site and 1 at the Portland site. So we're really excited. We're hoping to break ground next spring on both of those projects.
Thank you. And are those modular units, like the one in my ward, or are they separate?
Those will not be modular. Modular, you tend to, in order for it to kind of pencil out, so to speak, you have to have it at a larger scale. And most modular plants, like Rise that we worked with, they're not doing projects on that smaller scale.
I see. Thank you.
I think the Blaisdell one is in Ward 11. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. Director, we've reached the end of questions and discussion related to your presentation. Thank you for coming to talk to us about the 2025 budget, along with an overview of the next several years beyond that. It's very well appreciated by the council.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. With that, I will ask the clerks to file that presentation. And we will now move to our final item, item number 3, which is a resolution amending the 2024 General Appropriation Resolution, which was brought forward here today by Council Member Wansley, Council Member Chavez, and myself. I will ask if there are any questions or discussion related to this item. I'll first recognize Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Council Vice President Chektai. So I just want to provide some context about this motion before additional questions and consideration. So as this body is aware, we voted 9-4 to add carbon fees to the 2025 fee schedule. And this fee was in line with the staff recommendation on how to implement this policy. We also know Mayor Frye vetoed the entire fee schedule on the grounds that he believed carbon fees create unnecessary legal risk for the city, but did mention in the legal memo attached to that veto letter that 2 other legislative actions needed to be completed in order to justify this policy as well. So the resolution in front of you today is the first step towards addressing at least one of Mayor Frye's stated concerns in regards to implementing carbon fees, where again, that attached memo highlighted that we needed to justify the cost of this program before we implement it. And my work thus far has been to have an implementation of a PCAR fee on carbon dioxide for 2025. So this motion notes that it earmarks funds within the Health Department's existing 2024 budget for the establishment of the pollution control annual registration fee program for, again, carbon emissions. The amount of the program, which is $453,000 and $826, comes from Sustainability's own report outlining the mitigation, staffing, and administrative costs for the program. I think we've had many of these conversations in regards to how financial decisions are made within departments. We know the health department ultimately has the discretion to allocate this from anywhere in their department's budget of totaling about $40 million. I do know as of August and as of last week, we heard some conversations around vacancies within the department. We also know vacancy savings are always an option. In August, the department did share in the report on FTE vacancies that we received that there were 8 vacancies. And amongst those 8 vacancies, there was about 70 months of vacancy. So meaning there were 70 months of vacancy savings. that carried over or still should be carrying over in spite of those positions possibly being filled. The health department already also has a robust pollution control program that administers fees for dozens of harmful technologies and air emissions. So with the passage of this funding allocation, essentially they will have 2 months to add carbon dioxide to that program and thus address that concern raised in that memo of justifying the cost of the program. And using the specific implementation guide that was laid out by the Health and Sustainability Department's report, specifically pages 3 to 9, they outline what would be needed to implement said program and the costs associated with it. So essentially, again, this will allow them to start making progress on that implementation or those implementation needs, starting with hiring, a staff person to start prior to these fees being charged to the polluters, which would be 36 on the P card list or registry as of now. And again, it helps to establish, define, and justify program costs, and hopefully eliminating, again, the mayor stated concerns around this particular piece. So I just wanted to offer that context and stand for any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is actually for the city attorney. I'm curious if this action satisfies the concerns that were raised in the memo from October 8th from Ms. Anderson. Specifically, it said, setting the new PCAR in advance of creation of a regulatory program and without full understanding of the city's involved expenses is premature. Adoption of a fee now is counterproductive to creating a fee that withstands scrutiny.
Chair Chektai, Councilmember Palmisano, no, it does not change the city attorney's office's opinion. The action today to earmark money within the 2024 health department budget, noting that we have 2.5 months left in the year, as the resolution states, to essentially create a program is not what will occur. Earmarking money does not create the program, does not compel the executive administration, in this case the health department, to create the program. And in fact, adopting a fee before the program is created, and it has not been created, it's still being created. There's necessary staffing that health department has indicated they would need. That has not occurred, as we all know. The hiring process in the city of Minneapolis takes a very long time. This particular position would require the creation of a JAQ, posting, hiring, onboarding, et cetera, for a very specified position. And so none of these actions in and of themselves make this program happen. That will occur only when the administration is ready to proceed with the program and to implement it. And I think they've been fairly consistent in saying that is ongoing, and they have an eye on the 2026 fees, which would be setting that appropriate fee at that time, around this time, approximately next year.
Thank you. This is also verified in an email from this morning from Director Hanlon. He indicates that reappropriation in 2024, this year, is not possible within his division, and it's not possible within the health department in general. He also states what Mr. Nilsson said about the FTE required for this program is yet to be defined. The hiring process would generally take about 6 months to define, advertise, interview, and hire somebody. So I would ask my colleagues, what is the point?
Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Koski.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. And I just had a couple questions, possibly for the authors, and then maybe to Director Hanlon as well. Yes, seeing this email today, understanding that you were under the impression that this was for a 2025 earmark. Is that correct, if you don't mind?
Welcome, Mr. Hanlon.
Chair, council members. Yeah, my understanding on Friday when the request came out was that it was for 2025. For 2024, I'm understanding that's what the earmark is for. There's no there's no budget available in 2024 in our division, and from my understanding, talking with our health leadership within the health budget to make that kind of room within our budget. And then it also, as we've should just clarify, we want to move forward with this program with the PCAR program, and we've been looking at CO2 as a pollutant for a number of years here, and about today, and using 2024 budget doesn't solve our problem of creating a fee before we have a program on the budget books.
Okay, and it's my understanding, though, that the request that they're asking, this appropriation, is also not currently in our 2025 budget. So we would, even if we would still need to do an amendment for 2025 to make sure that we continue the work.
Correct.
Okay. Another question that I have, and I'm not sure if it's for you or for HR, and perhaps to the authors, I guess what I'm hearing is that the policymakers want to move forward more quickly and want to make sure that you have what you need in place soon. And so would want to make sure that at the beginning of 2025, you have what you need in order to make sure you can get the JAQ going and hire as soon as possible. I see from your email here that, like you said, it typically takes 4 months to get through our process. And yes, we do only have 2 months left in this year. Mm-hmm. But what is it that you would need for 2024 in order to hit the ground running if you were able to get this appropriation for 2025?
So that's what I need, is the appropriation. That was what I would have to have, is there would have to be something in the 2025 budget that says that this is a program for us to be able to justify a fee, and I can refer to the attorney's office if I'm stating that correctly. For us to pass a fee this year, I would have to have something on the books, and currently there is nothing.
Correct.
In 2025.
Right, and we're going through our budget amendment process coming up, and so this is something that we could move forward in for an appropriation for 2025. Would that, but if that's something that we are looking to do, is there something that you would need from us in 2024 in order to at least get going on what we're asking you to do? Or can you not start any of that work until January 1st of 2025?
Yes, Councilmember Koski, that's the issue on the books, that there's a program in 2025, and we don't currently have that. And that's all. And then we do have as was stated, we have a plan to move forward in 2026 to pass a fee and to be making a budget request to have a program.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Hanlon, while you're here, just a quick follow-up question. I'm sorry, Deputy Commissioner Hanlon. Order of operations question for you. Can you begin the process of creating a JQ with HR if you don't have an appropriation in place to pay for such an FTE?
That is probably maybe an HR question. We typically, Councilmember Chugtai, we typically have we have to have a position number that we assign to that JAQ, and so I would have to ask HR if they're able to do that.
Yep. So I'm quite certain the answer to that is no. I don't think you can willy-nilly go to HR and say, I want to create a new position. I have no money for it, though. So you couldn't begin the process of having an FTE in order to implement the program without the funding in place in the first place, could you?
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Council Vice President. And also thank you, Vice Chair Koski, for asking those questions. So I believe, it's not a surprise to this body that for several months I have actually talked about bringing forward a FTE position for this particular carbon emissions mitigation effort to get it added to the PCAR schedule for 2025. I've spoken about that for several months. That's always been the plan. But I'm hearing something different just now, where we were told, again, there was no desire to move anything in 2025. So I'm actually glad to hear that there might be a change of heart on that. And it was always, our goal to bring that FTE position. But as you just mentioned, Council Vice President Chuck Tai, from my understanding, in order to advance one of the key components of starting a program in 2025 would be that FTE, or to at least justify the cost of that FTE before anything is charged in January. So we pull literally from page 9 of the joint PCAR report, where it says in evaluation of a potential CO2e, carbon dioxide, pollution control annual registration program starting in 2025, including the cost of staffing, administration, enforcement, and mitigation. We see that the total cost is $453 and $826 per year. And specifically, it goes and says it's $180,000 estimated cost for an FTE staff position. So we brought an allocation that reflected the cost of the program as recommended to us by staff. And we can only go on the information that's given to us by staff. We can't make up anything. So that is where this was reflected. And this also addresses, once again, what was raised on page 3 of the legal memo sent by the City Attorney's Office that says the validity of a regulatory fee, therefore, hinges on close alignment between program design and fee amount. A PCAR fee for carbon dioxide must be tailored solely to recovery of the city's regulatory costs related to processing the registration fees, inspecting covered facilities, administering any regulatory program specific to those facilities. And literally the page 9 of the PCAR report responds directly to the very thing raised in the legal memo. So we have very much been working in alignment with what has been provided to us from staff in terms of information, and also some of the legal concerns raised by our City Attorney's Office around the programmatic needs. So again, this motion helps us to advance that work, to be prepared for a rollout of a PCAR program in 2025, and of course, have commitment to bring that FTE position during the regular budget process so that we can make sure there's a permanent, programmatic resources available to the health department to continue said program throughout 2025.
Thank you. And next I'll recognize Vice Chair Koski.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. So, we did receive this email from Director Hanlon about 3 minutes before committee. And I feel like I have a lot more questions just to make sure that we have our ducks in a row here. And so I think that we have a couple more days before committee, so I'm not sure what the best route would be here. If we could make a motion to move this without recommendation and then make sure that we have conversations. I am hearing that we want to move this forward more quickly, perhaps, than what you had anticipated from the staff, but that is the role of the policymakers to make that decision of when we want to start this timing. So I think there's more conversations that have to happen in order for us to, I hear us having a common goal, so I want to figure out how we can get there. So I would make that motion to move this forward without recommendation so that we can have some further conversations to get aligned with HR, budget, and the health department.
Second.
We have a proper motion to forward this item to Thursday's council meeting without recommendation. On that motion, are there any questions or discussion? Councilmember Palmisano, were you hoping to speak to this motion or the?
It's relevant to this
Wonderful,
idea
then
of
I'll
moving forward to Thursday, which is 2 days away. As a result of this council's decision on agate, the deputy chief, Saray Garnett Hohuli, specifically mentioned that one of the ramifications of that action suspends job classification studies. That is something that is what she said was the ramifications of something that you did here. So we're not doing those for the rest of the year. That's a direct ramification of the agate action. So how do we create new positions that require a JAQ like this one? I don't think we're going to answer that by Thursday that process ended for the rest of the year.
Councilmember, I'd just point you to item number 1 that this body approved earlier in this agenda, which includes the appointed position in the Civil Rights Department, creating a new position, which included a job classification study that was completed. Clearly, classification studies are still happening.
That was already in progress when that action was taken. So if that, I mean, you know the long process of having an RCA. Job classification studies have been suspended.
Is there any further discussion or from you?
I'd like to understand how we will create this new position if, in fact, job classifications have been suspended for the end of the year.
I'm not, so the motion before the body right now is to move forward this item to Thursday's meeting without recommendation.
And Madam Chair, what I'm indicating is that I don't think there's a way to answer this critical piece of it by Thursday. Plus, it would take months to hire this position. So it doesn't seem wise for us to bring this to a vote on Thursday when what our city attorney has stated earlier is that this isn't going to be able to happen as quickly or in the sequence that is needed here.
Got it. Council President Payne.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai. I just want to ground this conversation in some realities that we're facing right now. And one of those realities is that our federal FEMA employees are getting hunted by militias as they're trying to respond to hurricanes on the ground. And I think it's just really important to remind ourselves that the reason that we're trying to move forward with this action is because we are seeing an escalation in the types of tragedies that climate change is bringing upon us. And our governments are not able to be responsive to these realities right now. And so I very much want us to get this legally correct. I think I really commend Councilmember Wansley's tenacity on this. She's been working on this basically since being elected. And I mean, the climate crisis is not waiting around for JAQs. The climate crisis is not waiting around for our state government to figure out what the right order of operations is for cost capture. The climate crisis isn't waiting around for HR to figure out what the right capacity is to be responsive to this request. And so I think there's actually a lot of alignment between both City Council and the mayor and our professional staff on meeting this moment with the urgency that it requires. And so I think it's very wise of us to move this forward without recommendation. Let's really escalate and prioritize the conversations that need to happen so that we are meeting this moment with the urgency that it requires.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further discussion. So with that, Mr. Clerk, will you call the roll on moving this item forward without recommendation?
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
No.
Vita is absent. Ellison.
Aye.
Osman is absent. Cashman.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
No.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes and 3 nays.
That motion carries, and this item has been forwarded to our council meeting on Thursday without recommendation. With that, we have dispensed of this item, and we've concluded all business to come before the committee this morning, and without objection, we stand adjourned until October 21st, 2024 at 10 a.m., where we will receive presentations from the Office of Community Safety, from Emergency Management, and from Public Works. Thank you, everyone.